We're taking you back to Norsewood, to what many consider to be the heart of this tiny southern Hawke's Bay town, a factory famous for its woolen farm socks. Hundreds of local people have worked at the Norsewear factory over the years, but it's had its ups and downs. There was a time when its employees bought into it just to keep it going. Now it's under new ownership, and there are big plans to connect the brand back to the farmers growing its raw product, wool. Sally Round took a trip to the factory floor via the tea room.
I'm Serena Montgomery. This is Sally Round from RNZ. Serena.
Step into the tea room and it's not too long before you get a sense of just how close-knit the Norsewear and Norsewood community is.
So Serena worked here when she left school, then ran a very successful hairdressing business for some time.
There are 19 staff here. Some have worked here all their adult life. They come from the small towns and settlements round about, Waipawa, Dannevirke, Ormondville, and of course, Norsewood itself.
So Olivia is Serena's daughter, and Michelle is...
Sister? Family?
Sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And I'm not related.
And it's not related.
The family feel is quite some change for owner Tim Dean, who took over in February 2023 after a career in global corporations, Fonterra and Goodman Fielder to name two. Moving into socks, beanies and scarves is not a complete departure for him, though. He worked as a wool classer in his youth, and he does know a thing or two about brands.
So let's go for a quick tour.
Norsewear's had a few owners in its 60-year history, including staff members themselves at one stage. And here in one of the storerooms, the staff have made their mark.
Each aisle is named after either a current or a former staff member.
There's OB Avenue over there as well.
Yeah, and then I think there's Tingy's Lane down there. Tingy's Lane.
Tingy's Lane.
Yeah, so it's just a bit of fun, really. The thing that's really special about it is that if you have a really stable workforce, the skill levels build up over time, and you end up with a competitive advantage because you've got staff that really know what they're doing, and that's part of the reason why Norsewear socks, for example, are such high quality, because you've got decades of experience built up here. You couldn't just take this place out of Norsewood and set up somewhere else. You'd lose all of that expertise, and you'd lose so much of the value.
Norsewear was started by Norwegian Ole Rien, who started making socks and hats in his Wellington house in 1963.
Who's this, sorry?
This is Terence.
Terence.
How many years, Terence? I'm in my 46. He's in his 46th year, 2 days sick in 46 years.
I must love the place, though.
And Tinga usually comes in and sets up. You'll be here by 5 in the morning. Tingy's in at 5. Zane often comes in with him, and they get the machines all set up, warmed up, ready to go. And then 6 o'clock, everything goes on.
What are you doing there, Terence?
I'm threading up the elastic on a BR knitting machine that makes our farm flecked socks. So these are the oldest. These machines were here when Ole Rien, the founder, was here. These were the first original machines that came to Norsewear back in the late 60s, late 60s.
And the Edmund Hillary sock.
Yeah.
What's your involvement with that?
Well, that was probably done a little bit before my time, but basically that's what we're still knitting now, except the longer version of it.
So Ed apparently chose the chunky sock to complete a traverse of Aoraki Mount Cook in 1971. The story is part of the company's folklore.
We were trying to work out which machine actually...
This machine would have been the ones that...
This one?
Yep.
How do you know?
The original machines.
How do you know?
Because I know the sock.
There we are. What made that sock so good?
Well, you're talking 30, 40 years ago now, so it was just a pure wool New Zealand made sock. Hard wearing, very hard wearing, still is today.
So you can see this is a big long shoe.
But they're not just stuck in the past. Apart from these original knitting machines, they have high-tech ones too.
So this is a Cortese finishing machine. So every single sock is checked again and put by hand onto a foil. Goes through quite a lot of heat and steam, and that sets the sock. It actually shrinks it down, makes sure that it comes out exactly the right size. So it'll go around there, and then you watch it pop out and down onto that conveyor belt over there.
Sharon Doreen is at a more hands-on machine, closing the toes on the farm socks. She's 76 and still full-time.
This is a brand new machine. So this machine only turned up yesterday, so Sharon's still running it in.
It's not been very nice to me. Hasn't it? No. Talk me through what you're doing, Sharon. I'm just going to cut these off. I can lift that up like that, put the sock underneath it, and then push it down, and then just...
You have to be pretty quick and nifty with that movement, don't you?
Yes, the other one was much quicker. I'll get there in the end. I'm just folding it in, like that, pushing it down. Lift that up like that, down.
Done. How many socks have you closed the ends of, do you reckon, in your career here?
Thousands. Absolutely thousands.
How long have you been here?
I've been here just on 33 years, but I've only been doing farm fleck for about the last 15 years, and we sell a lot of them. Whoops. The best socks you can buy.
We love having Sharon here. She loves being here. Every time we talk about retirement, she tells me, don't be ridiculous. So, no, she's a really important part of the team, and yeah, we love having her around.
I do overtime if I need to do overtime, but not a lot.
Let's rewind and head to a quieter spot and find out what made Tim jump into the woolly sock business in the first place, and find out a little bit about his plans to make it work.
I've spent a good deal of my career selling New Zealand commodities offshore and having those commodities get used by other companies that have brands, and the brand value stays offshore. So I could see an opportunity here where we could take a brand like Norsewear to the world and bring the goodness back home into a local regional community. So that was the first reason. Secondly, I think that more and more people are thinking about where their apparel comes from. I think wool has got a very, very bright future in the apparel industry. And I think people are being more thoughtful with the brands that they buy. They want to know that they're made ethically. They want to know that the people that have made them are paid properly, that the processes that are being used are sustainable. And so I could see that Norsewear does stand for all of that. Definitely needs some investment, but that was the second reason I could see that there was potentially a really big opportunity if we could tell the story. So this is our yarn store. So typically we would hold up to 6 months supply. The yarn is largely New Zealand and Australian wool, as much New Zealand wool as we can. And you'll see over here, this is woolen spun yarn, which comes from wool yarns just near Wellington. We use mostly worsted spun yarn, and that is wool that has to come from New Zealand and Australia, go offshore, because there are no worsted spinning mills left in New Zealand. They all shut down, and so we have no choice but to take our beautiful wool and send it offshore to be spun before it then comes back and gets turned into product. I think that the only way we're going to have a future in the wool industry here is you've got to connect brands back to the farmer. So I've started by making sure that the yarn that we use to make our work socks is sourced in New Zealand. The next step is to understand which farms produce the wool that goes there, and then after that, and this is going to take some time, but after that, my view would be that we would need to have long-term contracts with farmers. You're supplying this specification of wool for Norsewear, and then we need to pay them a fair price for their wool. So they would need to be paid more than they're paid on the auction market. Now, of course, that then increases the cost of making the socks, but if you've built a strong brand, then you can absorb those costs because people will pay a little bit more. And so that way you're sharing some of the brand value that you have developed back with the farmers that have produced the wool in the first place. And if we don't do that, there won't be a wool industry. Farmers have to be paid fairly. And at the moment, in many cases, it costs them more to have the wool shorn off the sheep than they earn from the wool that they sell. That's nuts.
You've been in the global export world. This is going to be tough, isn't it?
It's certainly much harder doing it than talking about it, that's for sure. This is a small business, essentially. It's been a real eye-opener for me. I've learnt a lot about how small businesses operate. And farms, because farmers are also small businesses. I think the opportunity is massive, and I think if we can get some other organisations in the industry to think differently as well, and there might be some other companies that are keen to collaborate and work alongside Norsewear, I think we can affect a big difference.
Back to the factory floor.
So this is a really high-tech Italian Linati sock knitting machine. These are about $70,000 each. Highly sophisticated. You start with a computer program to design the sock, then that gets turned into sock machine language. I think there's up to 1,600 lines of code with some socks, quite technical. That gets programmed into the computer in this machine, and then the computer tells the machine what to do.
What is New Zealanders' connection with the wool off the sheep's back?
It was really interesting. We did a piece of market research to test the refreshed brand. There's no question New Zealanders do care deeply about where the wool comes from, where the product's made, the quality of the product.
So why are they buying cheap socks from offshore?
Probably because they're unaware that there's the opportunity to buy fantastic socks that are made here. I think it's probably more of an awareness challenge than anything else.
Despite the recession, sales have grown in the past year, but Tim's keeping numbers close to his chest. Remember those ups and downs we talked about earlier? Well, Tingy, the Norsewear technician we met earlier, knows all about that.
The day I walked out of high school was the day I started at Norsewear. There was no Silver Fern Farms, there were no Alliance freezing works in those days, so Norsewear was a huge employer. There was actually 100 staff on the floor when I started.
Your kids have all worked here as well?
Yes, Ricky, Nadine and Matthew all worked here at some stage, as well as Lisa, my wife.
Does it kind of keep the little town afloat, do you think?
Oh, definitely. It's changed a lot because we used to employ 80 or 90 locals, in our area, and that was a lot more wages. But still, there's a lot of people rely on this for their income, definitely. And they spend that money at the local or at the cafeteria, as Serena said, or at the shop. You go up to the Norsewood pub and you look at their feet when they take their gumboots off. You'd be hard pushed to find a cocky in this district that doesn't have a pair of Norsewood socks on in some respect. Norsewear is Norsewood and Norsewood is Norsewear. That's it. It's just part and parcel of the community here. It has been for the last 40, 50 years.
Even before Tim's Day, 18, it's always supported community events and everything all the time. Yeah.
That's Serena Montgomery, who runs the operation here.
Allowing firefighters that have worked here over the years, allowing people to go to fires to serve their community, to golf clubs, to when the bowling club was open, to school events, anything like that.
And you yourself are a firefighter?
Yes, coming up 25 years this year. Yeah.
So what happens when the siren goes off? There's quite a few of you here, aren't there?
Tinging used to be the chief a couple of years ago, so yes, it leaves a little bit light on the floor, but we do what we can do and hopefully come back as fast as possible, Tim?
When I'm down here and I hear the siren, I go, oh right, the factory's clearing out. And then people just drop everything and race out the door.
So what did we have here a while ago, didn't we? We had you, Junior, we had four. Had a whole crew that used to work here that used to leave.
The whole crew?
Yeah, get the truck out.
Back to Tingy, who's retired from the Volunteer Fire Brigade now, but still kept very busy on the factory floor.
So I program machines, fix knitting machines, sort of do everything in the factory that's required. Operate machines, even sweep the floors if we need to. Everything. Everyone mucks in this factory and does everything.
You've seen a few owners come and go, haven't you?
I originally started with Ole Rehn, who was the founder of this company, when he came up from Johnsonville as the Norwegian ambassador for one of our centennials, one of our jubilees up here. And he had a choice. He was going to buy a factory in Awakuni because he's an avid skier, or he was going to, and when he fell in love with Norsewood when he arrived here, so that went out the window, and he brought a house up there and brought the old dairy factory, and the rest is sort of history.
You also were involved in keeping the factory afloat when it went through hard times. What happened?
Yeah. Well, I've been through 2 receiverships here and financial difficulties. And one of the things that came up the last time we sort of were in a serious receivership is the staff had the option to join the buyout. The managers fronted up with the main bulk of the money, and we were offered to put money in to become shareholders of the company, which about 20 of us did in those days. So we did that, and we got a little return on our money every year, a dividend and a dividend and a dividend. And we got a little.
But it wasn't easy times. They had to pay royalties to use the Norsewear brand, which had become separated from the business along the way, and lowered tariffs meant cheap socks from China. Tim was able to buy back the logo when he took on the business.
Well, we've been lucky. As we've got in financial trouble, certain people have come along like Tim at the moment, who's been so generous to the community and the staff in this company. They found a passion for Norsewood. I don't know how you describe it. They come in here and they see what the company's about, and they realise there is a future if it's well managed and run properly. Even, in New Zealand it's quite hard economic times, but there is a future for the textile industry for the ones that can hang in there. And Tim's obviously picked up that passion, what we're grateful for. And hopefully with him and Grace and everyone that's working here at the moment, we've breathed a new life into our name, which is huge.
Anna Clark hasn't been here quite as long as Tingy. She works dispatching the apparel around New Zealand. Some of it goes to Australia and the UK. And apparently Irish farmers like kiwi socks too. Where's that one heading, Anna?
This is for PGG Wrightson's for the field days. Mystery Creek, yeah, so we're getting all that together now. It's quite a big order.
And they all want the traditional stuff, won't they?
Yep, absolutely.
What have you got in there?
So we've got the kids' beanies and gumboot socks for the kids. So we've got pink and we've got charcoal, which is a...
Are you off a farm yourself?
Yes, I am. Yep. So I'm quite critical when it comes to socks, but now I've got my favourites.
What are your favourites?
Pink gumboot. And this is really cool because for me it's sort of being a farmer and my husband's a hunter and a builder. It's sort of, being able to see how things are made and whatnot is really cool. So,
how difficult is it to get a job in small town New Zealand?
Yeah, it is difficult. And it's also difficult for the likes of me being a parent, because I do have to work around the kids. And this job is perfect for that.
Have you got any thoughts about the use of New Zealand wool in products that are made here?
Super important, super important. It's, like I've worked in sheds, I've worked as a rousey, and it's just such an important commodity, and it's, it can do so many different things. And I mean, I use dags in my veggie garden, like from socks to that sort of thing. It's so important and it needs to be looked after.
So where to from here for Tim and his company? He points to a new report out which highlighted the obstacles and the opportunities for New Zealand's textile and apparel industry, worth $7.8 billion in 2023. Tim says Norsewear itself puts more than $1 million a year back into the local community through wages. But if it's to be successful, he says the industry needs more support.
Investment in education in apparel and textiles is basically, there's very little left here in New Zealand. So it's hard for me to find skilled people. We're very fortunate with the skilled techs that we've got here, but we're effectively training people ourselves. I can't go out and find somebody that's done a course at the Polytechs or anything else. All of those courses are now gone. So the first thing is we've got to have a look at developing the capability. The second thing is there's very little now in the way of manufacturing infrastructure. I've got to send wool offshore to get spun and then come back again. And a lot of the infrastructure that was here 20 or 30 years ago has gone. So that's the second thing that we need to think about. The third one is, I think we have the opportunity in New Zealand here. We're a small country. There's only 5 million of us, and we could actually develop a completely circular economy, in terms of slow fashion and then understanding where the stuff comes from and what happens to the end of life. We could become, the exemplar for the world. And although we might be small, if we can pull that off, then we become a highly desirable place for people to buy clothing from. I think we've got a huge opportunity to grow value for this country by getting it sorted out. But we just have to think differently, and we have to collaborate, work together.
Tim Dean of Norsewear at his factory in Norsewood. And that story was produced by Sally Round. And I can personally recommend those socks. They're the warmest thing when you're riding a motorbike.
They have a great little sale in October, Socktober.
Something to look forward to.